lovely people. Welcome, we meet again. And if you're new here, hello, I'm Ava. I'm an American living here in the Netherlands. And that noise you might hear in the background is my cat Chunky, who features in some of my videos, even though I tell him not to. Anyway, in today's video, I want to talk to you about how you can use some of the habits that the Dutch have that could actually lead you to spending less money. So I'm going to tell you about these habits today while I drink my cup of coffee because, well, this is just nice and it's morning, so I need my coffee. But my coffee addiction is a topic for another day. So the reason I wanted to make this video is because I was talking to some friends back in the US and I was actually telling them about how I feel like I'm spending less money here. And one of the things they asked me was, well, are things cheaper in the Netherlands? And well, I find that to a degree that is true, but not for all things. I feel like there's something else going on there. And while that might not be the full story, I do think that lifestyle or habits, cultural norms, play a role in this. So I think that there's certain habits that the Dutch have that actually just inadvertently lead to spending less money. Or maybe it's not so inadvertent. Maybe it's on purpose. I think all the Dutch people watching this video are probably like, okay, wait a minute, Ava, I don't need to see the rest of the video. I'm just gonna go ahead and start commenting about all the things I do which allow me to save money. Because the Dutch are really proud about getting a good deal. So hey, if you are Dutch and watching this video and that's going through your mind, don't let me stop you. Go ahead and comment below. But I would also love it if you heard what I had to say and tell me what you think. So I have split this video into 3 categories. And the first one of those categories is food. I feel like my relationship with food has completely changed. And by food, I mean not what I eat per se, although that's of course different, but simply dining out or eating in or cooking more. So these things have completely changed since I moved to the Netherlands. And one of the big reasons I think for that has to do with how much the Dutch love to borrel. Borrel is the Dutch word for happy hour, and the experience of borreling is complete with both drinks and snacks. Now in the US, we also have happy hour, and believe you me, I was at all the happy hours during the week. I was the first one in the US to take advantage of those specials. So if you are not familiar with the US culture, in the US, our happy hours do include drink specials and food specials. So you can get things for cheaper during the hours of 4 to 6 or something. However, in the US, we are usually working between the hours of 4 to 6 or 4 to 7. So it's actually quite difficult to do that and to make that short window of time where you might have a happy hour. Now here in the Netherlands, borreling does not involve specials, so it's not that the food or the drinks are cheaper. But I do find that a beer in the Netherlands, especially if you're not getting a special beer, if you're just getting a regular beer, like not super fancy, that is going to be way cheaper than a regular beer you can get in the US. I'm talking 2 to 3 euros for a beer, that cheap. And of course, these days, if you want to get a fancier beer or more specialty beer, then it is going to be a bit more. But there is still a difference. In the US, it is so expensive to get a drink. A glass of wine can easily cost you 12 bucks. So yeah, you better like beer, because at least that's around $6 or $7. So about 6 euros. But here's where the difference actually comes into play in terms of habits, because it's not just the price tag between those two things, it's more that happy hours or just borreling is cheaper than getting dinner. And in the Netherlands, I found that I go to more borrels. Of course, I'm ignoring the pandemic for the purposes of this video, but you go to more borrels instead of dinner, so it never ends up being as expensive as it would if you were to go out for dinner. That brings me to a related point number 2, that dinner in the Netherlands is a very special thing. So in the US, I would get dinner outside for no reason. So I would get takeout, I would go out to restaurants to eat just because I felt like it or I was too lazy to cook, really. So I would say in the US, I probably ate out 3 or 4 times a week. I'm not even exaggerating, and this is just for dinner. And in the Netherlands, I would borrel about the same amount of times, and in terms of dinner, it would be a very special thing we did a couple of times a month. And I find that that's quite frequent, and it does help that the drinks are cheaper in the Netherlands. But the dinners in the Netherlands are also expensive. And in the US, that also translates pretty similarly. Dinner can be more expensive than if you go out for a drink and some appetizers. So if you are American and watching this, Here's a tip for you. Stick to the happy hours and then go home and eat your dinner. Now let's talk about takeout, especially now during the pandemic. Oh God, I love takeout. There we go. I said I was going to ignore the pandemic for the purposes of this video, and I did not. Oh well. Anyway, I absolutely love takeout. And in the US, I loved it a little too much, I would say. So I would go out to eat a couple of times a week, and then I would definitely order takeout once or twice a week as well. So I was really cooking about once or twice during the week in the US for dinner. And here in the Netherlands, I find that I get takeout once a week, and I feel like that's a lot. And I only do that now because it's the pandemic times, and that is the one nice thing I can still do, and I'm supporting the horeca, which is an abbreviation for hotels, restaurants, and cafes. And I really like doing that. But before the pandemic, I think I got takeout like twice a month. It had reduced dramatically from twice a week to twice a month. And needless to say, getting takeout is just not comparable to cooking at home. So while it might be a no-brainer to say, hey, well, you can cook at home and you can save money, I don't know what's so Dutch about it, but I think what's cool is keeping the social part intact. So if you stick to borreling and then eat bigger meals at home, that's going to save you money. And speaking of that, the Dutch love to bring these little sandwiches to lunch or some little lunch meals. And that was another thing that I found differed extremely between the US and in the Netherlands. In the US, I found that it was almost more normal to get lunch outside as opposed to bringing it from home. Whereas here in the Netherlands, it's more standard to bring lunch from home. So big difference there as well. And especially if you're going to be like the Dutch and bring these sandwiches, they literally cost you nothing. And I love bread and cheese. So when I learned about this, I immediately hopped on that wagon and got myself lots of bread and cheese, which doesn't cost too much, is delicious, easy to make, and you can bring to work with you. So a little sandwich goes a long way. And it was really surprising to me to see how much of a difference that made, because in the US, I would get lunch for $6 or $6.50, something like that, from a food truck, and I thought that was a good deal. And you regular viewers may know that I love my coffee. And in the US, I would get my coffee outside way more frequently than I do here in the Netherlands. In the US, there was that rare morning where I made my coffee at home, put it in this little mug, and took it with me to work. Here in the Netherlands, I have started drinking my first cup of coffee at home. It's just something the Dutch like to do. They like to sit down in the morning, have some quick breakfast, and drink their coffee at home, and then go into work and drink coffee at work. It's not even that common to hop out of work and go grab yourself a Starbucks as we would do in the US, or go to the nearest coffee shop where you get coffee and grab your coffee and go back to work. But I think even if you don't like office coffee, it comes from the fact that people just don't see the point in getting your coffee outside and then bringing it to work and drinking it with you, and then it costs $3 or $4. Here it would be 3 or 4 euros. So that obviously adds up. And I initially was resistant to this because I thought, well, no, I really like to have my coffee in this little cup and I like to bring it with me to work. And while that is true, I have slowly reduced that. And I've also tried to make this even more of a social thing. So if I go to get coffee outside, if I'm at work, then I'll ask someone else if they want coffee as well, or if they want to go out and have coffee for 30 minutes and chat about work or about other social things. So I've really tried to make it more special when I go out and get coffee. So I would say food is a pretty big category in terms of how I've found myself spending less since I moved to the Netherlands. But the second big category for me is transportation. In the US, I lived in big cities, so I was always paying for public transport. Now in the US, if you live in a place where you're driving your car, there's also car expenses. So you can easily translate it to that. So in the US, in a city like Philadelphia, I would spend maybe $2 to get from one place to another while taking public transport. I would also take a lot of Ubers because at nighttime, I didn't want to take public transport to go to wherever I was staying. That's also not something that people typically feel in the Netherlands, because I think the Netherlands, in terms of the hard crime stats, has less crime, or it's just safer than Philadelphia. However, that said, if you're drinking a lot, you don't necessarily want to spend all that time in a bus. You just want to get home. So an Uber is a nice, quick way to do it. that adds up very quickly. An Uber, for instance, even if I wasn't going that far, would cost me about $12, $8, and if you share like less, okay, but you're still spending for that public transport. The Dutch like to bike, and I found out quickly how much money you could save if you are biking. So when I moved to Amsterdam and I was commuting for work, I initially was really hesitant to bike because guess what? I properly learned how to bike only when I moved to the Netherlands. So when I just moved, I wasn't biking. I was not prepared to bike in Amsterdam because it can get crazy there. You really need to know what you're doing. So because I was commuting to work outside of Amsterdam, I had to take the tram from where I lived in Amsterdam to Central Station. And that tram would cost me about €2.20 there, and then €2.20 back. That is about €4. That's €4.40 for that little round trip that I could have walked if I wasn't in a hurry. Well, that again is over $4 a day. And if I were biking, I would not have been spending 20, 25 bucks somewhere, like 22 bucks a week to just get from one place to another. That's insane. And if I were on a bike, that would save me like 80 to 100 bucks a month. I mean, this is not exact math, but it's a lot of money that adds up pretty quickly. And also on the weekends, when you're going to places, you can just get on your bike, and then when you're drunk, it's still pretty easy to get on your bike and pretend to be sober and bike back home. So yeah, here's a Dutch habit for you. Buy a bike, start biking, and before you know it, you will find yourself saving a lot of money. And now this is a bit of a funny one, but related to transportation. When I lived in the US, I would fly to basically wherever I needed to go, or if I were going somewhere slightly closer, I would take the train, and that would still be quite expensive. This was in the US. Now in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands is, well, in Europe, and in Europe distances are completely different from what they are in the US. Like in 3 hours, I'm in Paris. In 3 hours, I'm in London. In less than that, I'm in Belgium. So there are more options here. But that said, what I have learned from the Dutch is they often go on holiday not too far away from here. They also go to places further away. But that made me think, if I were in the US, I could go on camping holidays. Another thing the Dutch like to do, to go on camping holidays, I could do that in the US. There are amazing parks and amazing places that the US can offer. And that camping aspect, or going on holiday near you and saving money that way, that I find is also quite Dutch. And then you can save the more long distance travels, and that's a little bit more special. Whereas in the US, I completely ignored that because I thought, well, if I need to go to California or Florida, I would most likely get on a plane anyway. So why don't I just get on a plane and go to, I don't know, South America, go to Argentina, go to Colombia. I haven't been to Argentina, so I don't know why I said that, but I have been to Colombia. I've flown all around the world, but the one thing I really haven't done is go camping near me in the US or go to any of the national parks. So that's on me. Don't make the mistakes I made. Learn from them. Go camping. Enjoy what's near you and what your surroundings have to offer. And the next and last category is a pretty big one, so it's weird that it's a category, but I do weird things and I just roll with it. So this category is buying things, and my relationship to buying things has changed so incredibly much since I moved to the Netherlands from the US. Because I think in the US, we just love stuff. We love buying things. For instance, when it comes to clothes, it's all about that fast fashion. Now, I'm not saying that everyone in the US is like that. There are, of course, lots of options for brands and types of clothes you buy, but I'm of course speaking more generally now and in my videos. But generally speaking, in the US, I would feel the need to buy new clothes, for instance, just so that I wasn't wearing the same thing over and over again. And okay, people noticing is one thing, but I also felt like it was less accepted. I felt that the quality of the clothes I was buying was less important, but what was more important was that I had more of them. Whereas in the Netherlands, I noticed that my girlfriend, her friends, people around me, and myself too, so tell me if I'm not correct in this, but I felt like it was more important to buy things that were better in quality, that would last you longer, and therefore you would wear it more often. But that was considered a good thing. It was more important to own these like nice pieces of clothes that you enjoyed wearing, that you wore more often, that you really got your money's worth from them, as opposed to just having, you know, $5 shirts in your closet and your closet is overflowing with them, and then you can just wear different clothes all the time. While it might seem counterintuitive that buying more expensive or more high quality things, which may often be more expensive, not necessarily, than the lower quality things, well, it might seem more expensive on the surface, but that's really not true. I have now bought a few pieces of clothes that come to the Netherlands, and I've worn those things for years, and I've just reduced the size of my wardrobe. Whereas in the US, I mean, I don't even buy that much. I think my buying level is quite average. I'm not someone who is like up to date on fashion. But that's telling, right? Because even someone like me, if I say I feel like I don't buy that many clothes, and if I think about it and look at it, I have bought things that I bought just because I wanted to have something different, as opposed to something that I thought, oh wait, this is really my style, it's good quality, I'm gonna buy it. So that has completely changed. And this is a hard thing to change your relationship with, but I think it's worth trying. So I have learned from the Dutch to focus more on quality and value and getting your money's worth, as opposed to keeping up with the Joneses and just like buying a lot of stuff. So what I talked about might seem pretty abstract, but let me give you an example of winter coats. So in the US, I felt like at all points during the winter season, I would need to own at least 3 different types of coats that I could switch between. And to me, 3 coats at the time at least didn't seem like a lot. It seemed like a perfectly reasonable amount. And then it was like, okay, well, the quality is next. How much am I willing to spend in order to get the quality that I want out of these 3 coats that I thought I just needed to have? Otherwise, it would be weird if I wore the same coat throughout the winter season. Here in the Netherlands, I have 1 coat and I wear it all the time. And if that coat is bust, I will buy another one. So yeah, that was a completely different way of thinking about things. And then if I were to buy another coat here, it would be because, oh, this winter coat that I bought is really for when it's quite cold and I need something for when it's not as cold, because otherwise I'm sweating in my coat. I think it's just different cultural norms, but doing it the Dutch way has caused me to spend less because I'm buying 1 thing as opposed to, well, in this example, 3. So those were some habits of mine that have changed since I moved to the Netherlands that have led me to spend less money. Let me know as usual in the comments down below if any of these resonate with you. If you are Dutch and you like getting a good deal, you like saving money, let me know how you do it in the comments down below. Until next time.